Keanu Reeves stood alone in the dark hallway, his eyes fixed on the half-open glowing door. His face was tense, eyes heavy with hidden tears, as if he feared the truth waiting behind that light. His hands trembled as he reached out slowly, the silence of the night pressing against his chest. And then, as the door began to open wider, what happened next will shock you in this video. The night was quiet. Too quiet for a city that usually breathed with noise. Keanu Reeves sat alone in his dimly lit living room. The clock ticked softly, the only sound cutting through the silence. He stared at the wooden door in front of him, his eyes fixed, his thoughts heavy. There was no knock, no sound. Yet something inside told him that behind that door, his life was about to change forever. From the very first second, something was strange about this night. Keanu felt it deep in his chest, a slow heaviness mixed with a kind of waiting. He was tired, not from work or travel, but from the weight of memories. Life had given him fame, respect, and success, but it had also taken away people he loved. He had known loss more than most, and tonight, that sense of emptiness was louder than ever. He told himself it was just another evening, but his eyes would not leave the door. Suddenly, a soft wind brushed against the window, rattling it slightly. He turned his head only for a moment, and when his gaze returned, he swore the shadow under the door had shifted. It was impossible. No one had knocked, yet his heart beat faster, his breath shorter. He leaned forward on the couch, hands pressed together, his mind whispering questions he could not answer. As the minutes passed, the silence grew thicker. Keanu thought about the people who had once walked through doors in his life. Friends who had become family, loves who had become memories, strangers who had become blessings. Every door he had opened had changed something in him, either filling him with joy or teaching him to endure pain. Tonight, as he stared at this door, he wondered what kind of truth might be waiting on the other side. The hook of the night lay not in what he saw, but in what he felt. Something deep told him that he was being tested, that this moment was not ordinary. He stood up slowly, the floor creaking under his steps. His shadow stretched across the room as he moved closer to the door. Each step felt like a question. Was he ready? Was he strong enough? When he stopped just a few feet away, his hand hung in the air, trembling slightly. He wanted to reach for the handle, but fear, an emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel, held him back. Fear of what might be revealed, fear of what might break his already fragile heart. And then, without warning, there was a sound. 3 gentle knocks. Not too loud, not too soft, just enough to make his chest tighten and his breath freeze. The suspense wrapped around him like a storm. Who could it be at this hour? A stranger? A friend from the past? Or something else entirely? He closed his eyes, and in those seconds, memories flooded him. He saw his younger self walking through doors with hope. He saw the moments when kindness had lifted him out of despair. He remembered acts of humility he had witnessed from strangers who asked nothing in return. He remembered the resilience that carried him through lonely nights when he thought he could not survive. The knocks came again, this time with a pause between them, as if whoever stood outside knew that Keanu was afraid to answer. With slow breath, he reached for the handle. His hand touched the cold metal, and in that touch, he felt the weight of everything. His respect for those who had stood with him, his grief for those who had left, his hope for something kinder beyond the door, and then, in one sudden motion, he pulled it open. The air shifted instantly. Light from the hallway spilled into the dark room, bright and almost blinding. But what shocked him most was not the light. It was the figure standing before him. It was someone he never expected to see again. The moment froze. His eyes widened, his body went still, and the silence carried 1,000 unspoken words. The person at the door looked back at him with eyes filled with emotion, carrying stories that could break or heal. Keanu's heart pounded harder than it had in years. In that instant, he knew this night was the beginning of something that would test him in ways he had never imagined. He whispered only one word, almost afraid it was not real. "You?" The figure at the door did not move at first. The silence between them was heavy, almost painful. Keanu's breath caught in his throat as he tried to understand if what he saw was real or only a shadow of memory playing tricks on him. The hallway light made the person's face glow faintly, and Keanu's heart felt as if it had been struck with both fear and longing. The person took a step closer, and suddenly Keanu felt a rush of emotions he had buried for years. There was kindness in those eyes, but also sadness, like someone who had traveled a long road filled with storms. Keanu stood frozen, unable to find words, and yet he knew this was no dream. This was real. The stranger whispered softly, "May I come in?" The voice was calm, but carried a weight, a voice that seemed to hold secrets of time and truth. Keanu stepped aside slowly, his hand trembling as he moved the door wider. His mind screamed with questions, but his heart was louder, telling him to listen before he judged. As the door closed behind them, the room seemed smaller, filled with a strange energy. Keanu sat back on the couch, his eyes never leaving the figure now standing in front of him. The stranger's hands were folded together, as if holding on to courage. "Why now?" Keanu finally asked, his voice almost breaking. "Why tonight?" The stranger lowered their head for a moment, as if ashamed, then raised it again with steady eyes. "Because time doesn't wait. And I could not carry this alone anymore." Keanu felt the pull of suspense tightening. He wanted to demand answers, but something inside told him to wait. Instead, he studied the face across from him, trying to see beyond the lines of sorrow. The night grew heavier as the conversation stretched into silence. The ticking of the clock seemed louder than ever, marking each second with an intensity that pressed on both of them. Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You disappeared," Keanu whispered. Without a word. "I thought I would never see you again." The stranger's eyes softened. "I had to disappear. If I had stayed, I would have destroyed everything. Sometimes leaving is the only way to protect the people you love." Those words cut deep into Keanu's heart. He thought about the times when he, too, had chosen silence over speaking, distance over closeness. He knew how painful it was to walk away from people you cared about, believing it was for their own good. Yet there was still a mystery. Why tonight? Why return after so long? The stranger slowly reached into their coat pocket and pulled out something small, wrapped in worn paper. They placed it on the table between them. Keanu stared at it, his curiosity mixing with fear. "Open it," the stranger said quietly. Keanu hesitated, then unwrapped the paper. Inside was a simple old photograph. His hand shook as he looked at it. It was a picture of himself from years ago, smiling with people he once called family. The photo was faded, but the feelings it carried were sharp, almost painful. "Where did you find this?" Keanu asked, his voice rough. "I never lost it," the stranger answered. "I carried it with me every day. It reminded me of what I left behind, and of the promise I made." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "What promise?" The stranger's gaze turned heavy. "A promise to return when the time was right. A promise to bring back something you lost." The tension in the room deepened. Keanu felt his chest tighten, his mind spinning. What could this mean? What could possibly be returned to him that life had already taken away? Suddenly, a knock sounded again at the door. This time it was louder, sharper, like a demand rather than a request. Both Keanu and the stranger turned their heads in shock. "Were you expecting someone?" the stranger asked, their voice tense. Keanu shook his head slowly, his eyes fixed on the door once more. "No, not at all." The knocking came again, harder now. The suspense stretched the air thin. The first visitor had already brought confusion and shock, but now another presence waited outside. Keanu stood, his body tense. His heart beat like a drum as he walked toward the door. He looked back once at the stranger who stood frozen in place, their expression unreadable. When Keanu placed his hand on the handle, he felt a sudden chill run through his body. It was not the simple cold of night air. It was the kind of chill that warned of truths too heavy to hold. He opened the door slowly, and what he saw made his breath stop completely. There, in the doorway, stood another figure holding something in their hands. Their face was hidden by the shadow of the hallway light, but the outline was unmistakable. It was someone connected to his past, someone who carried both pain and answers. Keanu could not speak. His throat closed. The first figure behind him gasped softly, as if they, too, had been waiting for this moment with fear. The second visitor stepped inside, and the door closed once again. The room, once a place of silence, now held three hearts tied by secrets, by promises, and by something greater than any of them had expected. Keanu knew this was no ordinary night. It was the beginning of a storm, and he was standing at the center of it. He whispered under his breath, words trembling as they left him. "Why are you both here? Tonight?" The air inside the room grew heavy, as if every breath carried weight. Keanu stood in the middle, his eyes shifting between the two unexpected visitors. The first stood near the couch, holding the old photograph, their expression torn between fear and longing. The second stood just inside the doorway, their silhouette sharp against the light of the hall, holding something clutched tightly in both hands. Keanu's voice was soft but firm. "Someone explain what is happening." The second visitor stepped forward, slowly revealing their face. It was pale with exhaustion, marked by years of silence, yet their eyes carried fire. In their hands was a small box, scratched and worn, as if it had traveled far and suffered along the way. "This belongs to you," the second whispered, setting the box on the table. Keanu stared at it, his heart pounding. "What is inside?" The second visitor looked at the first, their eyes locking for a long moment. Something unspoken passed between them, and Keanu felt like an outsider in his own home, caught in a storm he did not understand. Finally, the second turned back to him. "The truth. The kind that has been hidden from you for years." Keanu hesitated, his hand hovering above the box. He had opened many doors in life, but never one that felt this dangerous. What if the truth inside broke him? What if it destroyed the fragile balance he had built over the years? Yet something inside him whispered, "Open it." With trembling fingers, he lifted the lid. Inside lay a folded letter, yellowed by time, its edges frayed. The handwriting on the front made his throat tighten. It was a name he had not seen in so long, a name connected to a piece of his heart he had thought was gone forever. He picked it up. His eyes locked on the words, but before he could open it, the first visitor spoke sharply. "Don't read it yet." Keanu froze. "Why not?" The first's eyes filled with tears. "Because once you do, there will be no going back. Everything you believe about the past, about yourself, will change." The second visitor nodded slowly. "We brought this because you deserve to know, but truth carries a cost. Are you ready for that?" Keanu sank onto the couch, the letter shaking in his hand. His mind spun with questions. Who had written it? Why had it been hidden? Why tonight, after so many years, had these two chosen to return with secrets too heavy for the silence? He stared at the letter for what felt like hours, then finally whispered, "I have lived my life through loss. I have stood in the face of pain. Do you think another truth will destroy me? No, I will read it." He unfolded the paper slowly, each crackle of old parchment cutting through the silence. The words revealed themselves line by line, and as he read, his chest tightened until he could hardly breathe. It was not just a letter. It was a confession. The words spoke of choices made long ago, of sacrifices no one had told him about, of a connection to someone he thought he had lost forever. It told him he had been protected, but also deceived. It told him that behind his pain had been a hidden story, one that might have changed everything had he known earlier. Tears burned his eyes as he lowered the paper. He looked at both visitors, his voice breaking. Why was this kept from me? Why was I never told?" The first visitor stepped forward, their face pale. "Because you weren't ready, and because we weren't brave enough to face you. We thought silence was kindness, but maybe it was only fear." Keanu's hands shook as he placed the letter back on the table. He pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to steady himself. "All these years, I thought I had lost everything. And now you tell me that even in loss, there was more I never knew." The second visitor spoke gently. "Sometimes kindness means carrying a burden for someone else, even when it hurts. We carried it, but we can't anymore. Now it belongs to you." Keanu lifted his head, his eyes raw with emotion. "Then tell me the rest." No more silence. No more hidden truths. "I want everything." The first and second exchanged a long look again. Keanu could feel their hesitation, their fear. Finally, the first said, "If you truly want everything, then you must come with us. The truth cannot be spoken here. It must be shown." Keanu blinked. "Shown?" The second nodded. There is a place far from here where the answers wait. We did not come only to give you the letter. We came to take you there. The room went still. Keanu's heart raced. It was madness. Yet something inside told him this was no ordinary night. Fate had brought them to his door, and fate now asked him to walk through another. But he hesitated. Why should I trust you? The first stepped closer, their voice trembling but sincere. Because if you don't, you will carry emptiness forever. Because what waits for you is not just truth, it is hope. And hope is something you have lived without for too long. Keanu closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling with heavy breath. His whole life had been shaped by loss, but maybe tonight was about to reshape it with something else. He opened his eyes again, steady now, and whispered, Then take me there. The first visitor smiled faintly, though sadness still lingered. The second picked up the small box, holding it close. Together they moved toward the door, waiting for him to follow. Keanu stood, his legs heavy but determined. He glanced around his quiet home one last time, as if saying farewell to the silence that had kept him company for years. Then he stepped toward the door, past the threshold, into the unknown. The night outside was cold, but it felt alive with energy, as if the world itself waited for him. The three figures walked into the darkness together, bound by secrets and a destiny Keanu had never chosen but could no longer avoid. The road ahead was dark, lit only by faint street lamps and the cold glow of the moon. Keanu walked between the two visitors, his heart restless, his mind fighting to understand why the night had chosen him for this journey. Each step echoed with questions. Who had written that letter? What truth could be so heavy it required both silence and sacrifice? And where exactly were they leading him? The second visitor carried the box close to their chest, their grip tight as though the box itself was more fragile than life. The first visitor walked slightly ahead, glancing back often to be sure Keanu followed. Silence pressed around them, broken only by the sound of shoes against pavement and the distant hum of the sleeping city. After several blocks, Keanu finally spoke. If you want me to trust you, tell me at least this much. What lies at the end of this road? The first visitor slowed, then turned to face him. Their eyes were weary but full of fire. Not the end, Keanu. The beginning. A place where the past still breathes, where the answers wait in silence. Keanu's jaw tightened. And what if those answers break me? The second visitor finally looked at him, their voice calm. Then you will learn that breaking is not the end. Sometimes breaking is where real strength begins. The words struck something deep inside him. He thought of the years he had spent holding himself together after every loss, never allowing himself to fully break. Had he been denying himself healing by refusing to collapse? They reached a narrow alley, one Keanu had never noticed before, despite passing this neighborhood many times. The alley seemed endless, stretching into shadows. The first visitor motioned toward it. This way. Hesitation pulled at him, but Keanu stepped forward. The air inside the alley was colder, the walls damp with old rain, the silence thicker. As they walked deeper, he noticed something strange. Faded symbols carved into the bricks, almost hidden, almost forgotten. What is this place? He asked. A path only some are meant to walk, the first replied. A path of truth. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a small courtyard, hidden between buildings, shielded from the world. At the center stood an old wooden door, taller than a man, with iron hinges that looked as though they had been untouched for decades. Keanu's breath caught. Another door. His life seemed to be filled with doors tonight, each one leading to deeper questions. The second visitor stepped forward and placed the box on the ground in front of the door. This door will not open with force. It will open only with choice, Keanu frowned. Choice? The first visitor nodded. If you choose to step inside, you accept the full weight of what waits. You cannot walk back into silence. You cannot unknow what is revealed. If you refuse, you will return to your life untouched, but forever haunted by the questions you never answered. Keanu stared at the door. His body was heavy, his chest tight, yet his spirit whispered for him to move. I've lived long enough with silence, he said quietly. I want the truth. The second visitor opened the box and placed the old photograph inside the center groove of the door. The wood shivered slightly as though it recognized the image. Then a faint light glowed from the cracks, warm and golden, spilling into the night. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward into darkness. Keanu swallowed hard. "What is down there?" The first visitor's voice was low. "The story that was hidden from you. The story of the one you thought was lost." Keanu's heart nearly stopped. His hands trembled. The one he thought was lost. Could it be? No, it was impossible. Life had already taken too much from him. Yet the possibility was enough to draw him forward. He stepped past the threshold, the visitors following close behind. The air grew cooler as they descended the stairs, the sound of their footsteps echoing against stone walls. At the bottom, they entered a wide underground hall, dimly lit by candles placed along the edges. The air smelled of dust, old wood, and something sacred. In the center of the hall stood a single chair, and in that chair sat another figure, still and quiet, as though waiting for them. Keanu froze. His breath caught in his throat. The figure slowly raised their head, and the candlelight revealed a face etched with years of pain but also resilience. The eyes were familiar, heartbreakingly familiar. Keanu staggered back, his chest tightening so sharply he thought he might collapse. "No, it can't be," he whispered. The first visitor placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Yes, Keanu, it is." The figure in the chair whispered his name, softly, like a memory returning to life. "Keanu." The sound of that voice shook his soul. He had not heard it in years. He had grieved it, mourned it, buried it deep, and now it returned, breathing again, calling to him with tenderness that broke every wall he had built. He stumbled forward, tears burning his eyes. How are you here? I thought you were gone forever." The figure gave a faint, trembling smile. "I was gone from the world's eyes, but not from life. I lived in the shadows, kept hidden, because it was the only way to protect both of us." The truth began to unfold. But with it came a storm of emotions Keanu could not yet contain. Grief, anger, relief, and hope all at once. He dropped to his knees, unable to hold himself steady. "Why didn't anyone tell me? Why did you let me suffer in silence all these years?" The figure's eyes glistened. "Because sometimes love means disappearing. Sometimes love means letting someone believe a lie if it protects them from danger too heavy to bear." Keanu's hands trembled against the cold stone floor. The visitors stood behind him, silent witnesses to a reunion that had waited too long. He looked up, his tears spilling freely. "Then tonight is not just truth. It's a second chance." The figure in the chair nodded, their voice soft but strong. "Yes, Keanu, tonight begins again." Keanu could barely breathe as he knelt on the cold stone floor. The hall around him seemed to fade, the flickering candles trembling like his own heart. The figure in the chair was more than a memory returned. It was a living wound reopening, but also a light he never thought he would see again. His voice cracked as he whispered, "All these years I mourned you. I thought you were taken from me. I thought fate had closed every door. And now, here you are." The figure's eyes glistened. "I was taken, yes, but not in the way you believed. I was hidden. Hidden from the world, hidden from you, hidden for reasons I could not control." Keanu's hands curled into fists against the floor. Grief and anger mixed like storm clouds inside him. "Why didn't you fight? Why didn't you come back? Do you know what it did to me to lose you?" A silence followed, sharp and cutting. The two visitors stood nearby, shadows on the edge of the truth, their faces heavy with guilt. Finally, the figure spoke, voice trembling but steady. "I did fight. Every day, every night. But some battles are not won with strength. They are endured with sacrifice. If I had returned, it would have destroyed us both." Keanu shook his head, his heart pounding. "You let me live in darkness. You let me believe you were gone forever. Do you know how many nights I sat staring at a door, hoping someone would walk through, hoping you would return?" The figure's face broke with sorrow. "I know. And every night I wanted to come back. But I was bound by a promise to protect you, even if it meant breaking your heart." Keanu's eyes burned with tears, but beneath the pain was something deeper, a spark of understanding. He had lived long enough to know that love was not always gentle, that sometimes it wore the face of sacrifice, of silence, of absence. But the anger did not fade easily. "And these two," he said, pointing at the visitors. "They knew. They carried the truth, but they let me suffer alone." "How could you do that to me?" The first visitor lowered their head. "Because we were cowards. We thought silence was mercy, but mercy can wound as deeply as cruelty." The second added softly, "We told ourselves you were strong enough to survive without the truth, and you were. But that does not excuse what we did." Keanu rose to his feet, his body shaking. "You all chose for me. You all decided what I could and could not bear. But did anyone think that I had the right to choose?" The hall echoed with his words, the raw pain of a man who had carried too much loss. The figure in the chair closed their eyes, tears falling freely. Then they whispered, "You are right. We stole your choice. But tonight we give it back." "Tonight? You choose whether to hold on to this reunion or to walk away and let the past remain buried." Keanu's heart thundered. "Walk away! After seeing you alive? After feeling this moment? How can I walk away?" The first visitor stepped closer. "Because holding on will not be easy. The truth that you longed for is heavier than the silence you carried. You will face betrayal, anger, questions with no clean answers. Love will return, but it will come with scars. Are you ready for that?" The words sank deep into him. He thought of resilience, of the years he had survived. He thought of kindness, of how he had always chosen compassion even when the world gave him cruelty. He thought of humility, of how life had taught him that no one is untouched by pain. And then he thought of hope, the one thing that had kept him alive through every lonely night. He looked at the figure in the chair, his voice trembling but strong. "I don't care about scars. I don't care about betrayal. I care that you're here. I care that I can fight for this second chance." The figure's lips curved into the faintest smile, one filled with both pain and love. "Then we begin again. But know this, Keanu. If you choose this path, the storm is only beginning. There are forces that did not want me alive, forces that will not let this reunion happen quietly." Keanu's fists tightened. "Let them come. I have faced storms before. I will face this one too," the first visitor whispered, almost to themselves. "He is ready." Suddenly, the candles flickered violently, as if the air itself had shifted. A deep sound rumbled through the hall, not from the earth, but from something unseen, something waiting. The second visitor's eyes widened. They know we brought him here." The figure in the chair leaned forward, urgency in their voice. "Keanu, listen to me. Everything you thought you lost, everything you thought was gone. Tonight you have a chance to reclaim it. But only if you stand with me against what is coming." Keanu's heart raced. The night had begun with a quiet knock on his door. Now it threatened to unravel into a storm bigger than anything he had ever faced. He stepped closer, his voice low but unwavering. "I will not run. Not this time. If truth demands a fight, then I will fight. If love demands resilience, then I will endure." The figure reached out a trembling hand. Keanu took it firmly, the connection shaking them both with the weight of years lost. The hall shuddered again, the candles bending as if pushed by an unseen force. The visitors stood tall, their faces grim. Keanu tightened his grip and whispered to the one he thought he had lost, "Whatever waits beyond this moment, we face it together." The door behind them slammed shut. The storm had arrived. The hall trembled as if the earth itself had awakened. The candles shook, their flames stretching thin before snapping back. Keanu tightened his grip on the hand of the figure he thought he had lost, refusing to let go. Every breath in his chest felt like borrowed time, every second charged with danger. The first visitor whispered urgently, "They have found us." "There is no more hiding." Keanu turned sharply. "Who are they?" The second visitor's voice dropped low. "The ones who forced this silence? The ones who wanted the truth buried? If you stand now, Keanu, you stand against them. If you falter, everything is lost again." Before Keanu could answer, the great wooden door at the far end of the hall shook violently, as though someone, or something, struck it from the other side. The sound echoed like thunder in the stone walls. The figure in the chair, the one he thought gone forever, stood weakly, their body trembling, but their spirit unbroken. "They want me erased," they said, voice raw with emotion. "But I am alive, and that truth terrifies them." Keanu placed himself between the door and the figure, his back straight, his eyes burning with resolve. "If they want to erase you, they will have to go through me." The first visitor moved beside him, their face pale but determined. "We kept the truth hidden too long, but tonight we stand with you." The second nodded, holding the small box close to their chest like a shield. "Hope is the only weapon they cannot kill." The door splintered with a deafening crack. Shadows spilled into the hall, shifting forms that seemed neither fully human nor fully ghost. Their presence carried the weight of fear, like whispers from a forgotten grave. Keanu's heart pounded, but he did not step back. He had lived too long with silence and grief. Tonight he would stand, no matter the cost. The shadows moved closer, circling, their voices sharp like knives. "You should have left the past buried. You should have kept your silence. Now you will lose everything again." Keanu's voice thundered through the hall, steady and fearless. "I have lost before. But tonight I fight, not for myself, but for truth, for love, for the chance to begin again." The figure beside him placed a trembling hand on his arm. "Keanu, they cannot bear the light of truth. Remember that." And then, with sudden clarity, Keanu understood. He turned to the second visitor. "The box, open it." The second hesitated, then flung the lid wide. Inside, the photograph glowed with a golden light, brighter than the candles, brighter than the shadows. The hall filled with warmth, the kind of warmth born not of fire, but of memory, of love, of resilience that refused to die. The shadows shrieked, recoiling, their forms twisting in pain. They clawed at the air, but the light grew stronger, pushing them back, breaking them apart. Keanu held the figure close as the storm raged. "Stay with me," he whispered. "We are stronger together." The photograph's light poured through every corner of the hall until the shadows dissolved completely, leaving only silence and the steady glow of hope. The great door slammed shut on its own, sealing the darkness outside. Keanu's chest heaved with exhaustion, his body trembling, but he was still standing. The hall was quiet now, the air heavy with relief. The first visitor lowered their head. "It is done. The truth is no longer chained." The second closed the box gently, their eyes glistening. "The past cannot be erased anymore. It lives, it breathes, it shines." Keanu turned to the figure he had thought lost, his voice breaking with tenderness. "We fought for this moment. I will never let you disappear again." The figure smiled weakly, tears streaming down their face. "You didn't just fight for me. You fought for yourself. You fought for hope." Keanu cupped their face in his hands, his own tears falling freely. "Then let us live it. No more silence. No more doors closed between us. Whatever storms come, we face them together." For the first time in years, his heart felt whole. The emptiness that had lived inside him began to lift, replaced by a quiet strength, a love reborn. The visitors stepped back, watching with faint smiles. "Our part is done," the first said softly. "This is your story now." Keanu held the figure close, his voice steady and full of conviction. "This is not just my story, it is ours. It is a story of loss, of resilience, of kindness, and of the courage to hope when hope seems impossible." The candles burned brighter, the hall glowing with warmth. The silence that once haunted him was gone, replaced by something greater: peace. Keanu looked once more at the door through which the shadows had come. He knew storms would always exist, but he also knew that within him lived the strength to endure, the kindness to forgive, and the resilience to rise. Tonight, he had opened a door he once feared, and behind it he had found not just truth but a new beginning.